Hattie Hutchinson a liar? She was their star witness, January 6th committee, their star witness in one of those staged and choreographed hearings they paid the former president of ABC News to put together. She was, in fact, the only witness at this special prime.
Hattie Kwan had reconciled the same bank statement 311 times, and she had never once started at the top of the page. Everybody else starts at the top. The top is where the bank prints the balance, and the balance is the answer, and people like answers. Hattie starts at the bottom. She starts with the smallest line on the sheet, the one for $4 in wire fees, or $1 in change and interest. The bottom of a statement is where a mistake goes to lie down and hope nobody looks. She is 58 years old. She is the dues and benefits clerk at Local 481, a hotel and food service local with a low brick hall on Prater Way in Sparks, Nevada. She has had the job for 26 years. The hall has a coffee urn that has outlived 2 presidents of the local. It has 41 folding chairs that live in a rack by the door. It has a glass case with a softball trophy in it from the summer of 1994. The case has not been opened since. Nobody can find the key and nobody minds. The second Tuesday of every month is ledger night. That is not a formal thing. There is no bylaw about it. It is just what Hattie does. And it has been what Hattie does for so long that the shop stewards schedule around it. She turns on the light in the back office, the one with the window facing the parking lot. She pulls the dues ledger. She pulls the bank statement. And then she goes line by line from the bottom of the page up. She checks one against the other, the way a person checks a grocery receipt when the total feels wrong. Members ask her why she bothers. The bank is a bank. The computer already agreed with itself. Hattie has an answer for that, and she gives it the same way every time, which is to say without heat. A bank statement is not an opinion, she tells them. It is a list, and a list is not a summary of what happened. A list is a claim. It says who did what and when. It is printed by somebody who was not there, about people who were. If the list is wrong, the wrongness does not stay on the page. It walks. It gets into a benefit check. It gets into somebody's hours. There is a night at that hall that the older members still bring up. 9 years ago, the statement and the ledger came apart by $6.40. $6.40 in a fund that moves more than $1 million a year. The trustee on call told her to book it as a fee and go home. She did not go home. She sat under that office light until 11 at night with a mechanical pencil. She walked the list from the bottom up. At 9 minutes to 11, she found it. A single dues payment had been keyed twice, once correctly, once as a reversal. The reversal had a different date. It was not theft, it was not even really an error, in the sense that nobody had done anything careless. It was a machine agreeing with itself. She fixed it. She initialed the margin. She turned off the light. That is the whole of Hattie Kwan's political philosophy, and she would be embarrassed to hear it called that. She believes that a number belongs to a person. She believes that somebody has to walk the list. And she believes that the moment a list becomes too big to walk, it stops being a record and starts being a weapon. The people it gets used on will never once be told they were on it, which is how she ended up in a hearing room in Washington on a Wednesday morning in the spring, in a cardigan in the 4th row, with a spiral notebook on her knee. She had not come for that. She had come for trustee school. Every few years, the International runs 3 days of training for benefit fund fiduciaries. The local sends whoever will actually read the materials. For 26 years, that has meant Hattie. The Wednesday session did not start until 1 in the afternoon. She had a hotel room with a view of an air handler and a morning with nothing in it. At the coffee table on Tuesday, a trustee from a local outside Dayton had told her a story she could not put down. Years back, he told her, a congressional committee had gone to a bank for records. The request came with a clause in it. The clause swept in every account that had ever moved money with the account they actually wanted. His fund had been one of them. The fund had catered nothing, hidden nothing, and done nothing except accept a check for a hall rental. He learned about it later, secondhand, never in writing. Hattie asked him how many pages of his fund's statements ended up in a committee's custody. He told her he had no idea. Nobody had ever given him a count. That was the sentence that got her out of bed at 6 the next morning. Not the politics of it. The absence of a count. A list had been taken. No one on the taken end had a number. Hattie Kwan has spent 26 years believing that a list without a count is not a record at all. So she walked 11 blocks and went through a metal detector and found the room. Smash that like button right now, because it genuinely helps this channel reach people who still think a record ought to balance. And type one word in the comments. Type tally. That is the whole word. Tally. Not a slogan, not a side, just the plainest word in the bookkeeping trade for the thing that either matches or does not match. Type it, and then stay right where you are. What Jim Jordan did with 9 pages of paper over the next 50 minutes was not a shouting match. It was not a takedown. Nobody in that room would describe it as a fight. It was a tally. And what Washington has spent a very long time making sure you never see is what happens to a man in public when the two halves of his own record are read out loud. Back to back, in his own words, in the same afternoon. The hearing had a title so boring that 3 of the 4 cameras in the back of the room were still capped at 5 minutes to 10. Oversight of committee records retention. That was it. That was the whole banner. In a building where hearings get named like movie posters, somebody had gone out of their way to name this one after a filing cabinet. The Judiciary Committee meets in a long room on the 2nd floor of the Rayburn Building, room 2141, with a dais that curves like the inside of a shell and a ceiling high enough to swallow noise. Hattie noticed the acoustics before she noticed anything else. In her hall, a raised voice comes back off the cinder block and hits you twice. In that room, a raised voice goes up and disappears. It is a room built to make loud people sound small, which is a strange thing to build for a Congress. She got there at 20 past 9 and had her pick of seats. She took the 4th row on the aisle, where a person sits when she is not sure she belongs. The first thing she wrote in her spiral notebook was not about a person. It was about the furniture. There was a rolling cart at the witness table. Not a briefcase. A cart, the steel kind with 2 shelves. On it stood 9 binders, upright, the way books stand in a school library. 3 of them had colored tabs fanning out of the top edge like feathers. 2 lawyers from a member's personal office were arranging the top shelf. A 3rd young man had no visible task except to stand slightly behind the chair and hand things forward. He was very good at it. He did it the way a caddy hands over a club without being asked and without looking up. Hattie counted the binders twice. She wrote the number down. Then she looked at the other end of the room and stopped writing. Up on the dais, in front of the chairman's seat, there was a legal pad, a pen, and 1 manila folder. The cheap kind, the kind that comes in a box of 100, the kind her hall buys. It lay flat. It was not thick enough to hold a magazine. Later, a staffer opened it to set a microphone. She counted the edges of the paper inside. There were 9 sheets, 9 binders on one end of the room, 9 pages on the other. Hattie has spent 26 years around freight bills and audit letters and trustees who arrive with luggage. She has learned one unglamorous rule about paper. The person with the most of it is usually the person who has not found the page yet. Jerry Nadler came in at 9:51 for a 10 o'clock call. That is not the arrival of a nervous man. 9 minutes early is the arrival of somebody who has run 1,000 of these and knows exactly how long the room takes to settle. He is a small, deliberate man with an unhurried way of moving. He moved through that room the way a man moves through his own kitchen in the dark. He knew where the chair was. He knew which staffer to touch on the shoulder. He stopped to shake hands with 2 members who were not on his side of the aisle. The handshakes were not performances. He has been in the House since before some of the reporters in the 2nd row were born, and he had asked to be there. That is the part Hattie did not understand until much later, and it is the part that makes the whole morning what it was. Nobody made him come. There was no compulsion in it. The committee had opened a review of how document productions from prior Congresses were being held. A story had gone around. A production from his years as chairman was still sitting in a storage room in a building on New Jersey Avenue. He had written to the committee and asked for a slot. He wanted to explain the record. He believed the record was defensible. He had spent his life believing that the record was the thing that saved you. There is nothing cynical in that. It is close to admirable. It is also the exact reason the morning happened the way it did. Jim Jordan came in at 4 minutes to 10 wearing a jacket, which surprised the 2 photographers who had come specifically to get a picture of him not wearing one. He kept it on through the gaveling. He kept it on through the opening statement, which ran 90 seconds and contained no adjectives worth quoting. Then he sat down. He took the jacket off. He hung it over the back of the chair without folding it, rolled one sleeve, and did not touch it again for the rest of the morning. Hattie wrote that down too. She has watched a lot of men take off a jacket in a hall. Most of them do it to be seen doing it. This one did it the way a man does it before he starts moving boxes. He opened the folder. He did not stack anything. He did not fan the pages. Congressman, thank you for asking to be here. That's not nothing, and the record should reflect it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was better to answer questions than to read about them. Agreed. 3 areas this morning. First, a letter you signed. Second, what came back because of it. Third, what happened to what came back. That's the whole list. Then he asked the first question, and the first question was so small that a reporter in the second row put down her pen. How many years were you chairman of this committee? 4 years. And before that, you were the ranking member on this committee? I was. So you have sat in both chairs in this room? I have. It's an unusual perspective. I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to understand the institution. So would I. That's actually the point of the morning. Jordan slid the top sheet out of the folder and did not hold it up. He read from it, flat, without any music in his voice at all. Exhibit 1 was a letter. It went out over Nadler's signature in the spring of 2019, addressed to the general counsel of a bank, and it ran to 4 pages, and only one paragraph of it mattered. The paragraph was about privacy. It leaned on a Supreme Court case from 1976 called United States against Miller, which is real law, and which holds a thing that most people find surprising the first time they hear it. Your bank statement is not your document. It is the bank's business record. It is a record of a transaction you conducted with a third party. Once you conducted it, the constitutional privacy interest you have in it is thinned to the point of transparency. Nadler's letter said that. Then it said the part that mattered. Quote, the account holder's asserted privacy interest cannot operate as a veto on this committee's need for a complete factual record. The records sought are the bank's records. The scope of production should be defined by the transactions at issue and not by the preferences of the persons who appear within them. End quote. Congressman, did you sign that letter? I signed it. Do you stand by the law in it? The law in it is the law. Miller is still good law. You could sign the same paragraph tomorrow. I could. Do you stand by the scope in it? There it was, the first small turn. Hattie caught it because in her trade the difference between the rule and the scope is the difference between a policy and a bill. The scope was a matter of negotiation with counsel for the institution. I understand. Same question. Do you stand by the scope? Mr. Chairman, I'd want to look at the full production letter before characterizing it. It's the second page in front of you. Take your time. The staffer behind the chair had a tab out before the sentence was finished. That is what the 9 binders were for. They were for exactly this. They worked. The page came up in under 20 seconds. Hattie made a note that she would look at again on the plane home. The binders were fast. The binders were not the problem. Second area, Jordan said. What came back? He took the third sheet out of the folder, and this time he did hold it up, briefly, at chest height, so the cameras could see what it was and then stopped caring. It was a bank statement, 1 page of 1. Anybody who has ever opened an envelope from a bank would have recognized it from across the room. Hattie Kwan recognized it from the 4th row. Something went cold in her stomach that had nothing to do with politics. She knew the layout. 2 columns on the right, a running balance in the far column, the little box in the upper corner for the statement period. And at the bottom, under everything, the line for the monthly analysis charge. At her hall it runs $11 and change. It is the first line she checks every second Tuesday, because it is the last line anyone else would bother to read. It was not her fund. The name on it was blacked out. It did not matter. It was the same form, from the same kind of institution, printed by the same kind of machine. And it was sitting in a committee exhibit binder in Washington, 7 years after somebody in an office decided that the transactions on it were interesting. Exhibit 2. This is 1 page of the production your letter generated. The name is redacted because the account holder is not a public figure and has never been accused of anything. Congressman, do you know whose account this is? I do not. Neither do I. That's not a dodge. Nobody in this building has ever been told. Let me give you 4 numbers and then a question. First, the production covered 1,409 accounts. Second, of those, 1,162 had no relationship to the subject of the inquiry other than a single transaction with it. Third, the period ran 39 months. Fourth, the total came to 81,400 pages. Do you dispute any of those? I have no basis to dispute them this morning. I'd want staff to confirm. Your staff has had the numbers for 6 weeks. They didn't write back. That's not a criticism. Silence is an answer, too. Nadler did the thing that a career does for a man in a moment like that. He did not flinch and he did not concede. He reframed. He is genuinely one of the best in the building at it. He has been doing it since before the phrase message discipline existed. Mr. Chairman, a document production is not a search. The bank is a party. The bank negotiated the scope through its own counsel. Those are among the most expensive lawyers in New York, and they did not need my protection. A sweep clause is a standard instrument. It exists because the alternative is to ask a bank to decide for itself which of its own records are relevant, which is a worse rule. Hattie wrote a sentence in her notebook and underlined it, and the sentence was, "That is true and it is not the question." Jordan waited until the last word had gone up into the ceiling and disappeared. That's a fair defense of the clause. My question was about the 1162. Were they notified? Notification is governed by the institution's own obligations to its customers. Were they notified? That would be a matter for the bank. Were they notified? 3 times. The same 3 words, at the same volume, with no more heat on the third than the first. There is nothing in the rules that says a chairman may not simply ask again. Most of them do not, because the second time feels rude, and the third time feels like a trick. Jordan does not seem to experience it that way. He asks the way a man reads a meter, which is to say he will read it again if the number did not come out. The room got quiet at the third one. Not silent. Quiet, which is different, and worse. 14, Nadler said. 1 word, then a number. Hattie's pen stopped moving. 14, out of 1,162. She did that division in the margin without meaning to, the way she does every number she meets. The answer was so small, it did not want to be a percentage. 14, Jordan repeated. He wrote it on the legal pad. He did not editorialize? Thank you. That's the first number this committee has ever gotten on the record for that question, and you're the one who gave it, and the record will show that. That may have been the strangest moment of the morning. He thanked him. He meant it. 3rd area, Jordan said. What happened to what came back? But before that, 1 more letter. He took out the 5th sheet. Exhibit 3 was 2 years old. It was addressed to the general counsel of the same bank. It objected, in the strongest available language, to a subpoena issued by the current majority of the committee. Nadler had not written it alone. He had signed it first. Quote, "A statement of account is not a neutral list of figures. It is an intimate portrait of a private life. It records where a person worships, what medicines they take, which family members they support, and what they do on a Tuesday afternoon. To sweep such records into a congressional file is to conduct a search of the household without ever entering it." End quote. Congressman, did you sign that? I did, and I would sign it again this afternoon. I believe you. It's well written. Who wrote it? My staff drafted it. The words are mine. Then let me ask about the words. In 2019, you wrote that a statement is the bank's record, and the account holder's privacy interest cannot veto the committee's need. 2 years ago, you wrote that a statement is an intimate portrait of a private life, and that taking it is a search of the household. Same document type, same bank, same committee. Which sentence is the committee's rule? The 2 are not in conflict. Explain it to me. I'm asking honestly. Context governs. In 2019, this committee was pursuing a specific factual question of national consequence under a subpoena issued after months of negotiation. The current majority is conducting a fishing expedition against political disfavor. The legal instrument is identical. The purpose is not. Purpose is not a technicality, Mr. Chairman. Purpose is most of the law. It was the best answer he gave all morning. Hattie thought so too. She wrote "purpose is most of the law" in her notebook, with a small star beside it. It is the kind of sentence that sounds true and mostly is. Jordan let it sit for a beat. I want to be careful here because you just made a serious argument and it deserves a serious answer. So let me say what I think you're saying, and you correct me if I get it wrong. You're saying the paper is the same, the bank is the same, the number of households is roughly the same, and what changes is whether the committee's reason is a good one. That is a crude version of it, but yes. Who decides if the reason is a good one? Ultimately, the voters. In the immediate sense, the majority. The majority. So the rule is whoever has the gavel decides whether a bank statement is a business record or a household. That is not what I said. It's what the letters say. And Congressman, you signed both of them. That's not an accusation. It's a tally. And then Jerry Nadler scored, and he scored cleanly, and anyone who tells the story without this part is not telling the story. He did not raise his voice to do it. He turned one page in the second binder. The young man behind him had the tab out before the page was turned. For about 4 minutes, the room belonged to him. Mr. Chairman, since we are reading letters this morning, I would like to read one of yours. Go ahead. In the last Congress, this committee issued a subpoena to that same institution. I have the production letter. Page 2, paragraph 4. Quote, produce all records for any account through which funds were transmitted to or received from the subject accounts during the covered period. End quote. Mr. Chairman, that is my clause, not a clause like mine. Mine. Your counsel copied it out of the 2019 letter. They copied a comma my staff put in the wrong place. It has been wrong in this committee's files for 7 years. Somebody in the back row laughed and then stopped, because it was not that kind of laugh. Would you like me to confirm that? Nadler asked. You don't need to. It's true. Then may I finish the thought? Please. You are not standing outside my letter, Mr. Chairman. You are standing on it. Every majority does. The clause exists because the alternative is worse, and both of us know it. In 8 years, the person sitting in your chair will be from my party again, and will use my clause. Someone will hold a hearing about it. The paper will not have changed. That is not hypocrisy. That is the institution. That was true. All of it was true. Hattie wrote it down and did not put a star beside it, because she did not need to. And here's the thing that people who only watch clips will never understand about that morning. 2 things were true at the same time in that room. And they stayed true, and neither one canceled the other. It was true that a sweep clause is a real instrument with a real reason behind it. It was true that a bank left to sort its own records would sort them in its own favor. It was true that Jerry Nadler in 2019 was chasing a genuine question and not a fantasy. There was a payment at the center of that inquiry. It was real. It had been hidden. His work is why anybody knows about it. The men who hid it have never once thanked him. They never will. It was also true that 1,162 households had their 39 months of Tuesdays taken into a federal file, and 14 of them found out. Both. At the same time. In the same room. Jim Jordan is not a subtle man in most of the ways people measure subtlety. He talks fast, he interrupts, he does not decorate anything. But he did something in the next 30 seconds that the fast version of him never gets credit for. He conceded, "You're right about the clause. My counsel took it from your letter, and I signed the letter my counsel wrote, and I didn't read it against yours until 6 weeks ago. That's on me. Let the record show the chairman used the same instrument he's asking about." Thank you. And that's exactly why I asked for the third thing. Because if I'm standing on your clause, then whatever happened to your production is going to happen to mine, and I would like to know what that is before it does. He took the last sheet out of the folder. Exhibit 4 was not a letter, and it was not a statement. It was a form. It was the kind of form that exists in every institution on earth and that nobody looks at. A custody and disposition log. 1 line per production, with 6 columns ruled across it in gray. He read the columns out loud. He read them the way an auditor reads them, which is to say without any sense that they were interesting. Received. 81,400 pages. Reviewed for responsiveness. 9,300. Marked non-responsive. 72,100. Returned to the institution. 0. Destroyed. 0. Disposition. He stopped. The disposition column is blank, Congressman. Not 0. Blank. Nobody has written anything in it since the spring of 2019. He put the sheet down flat. Here are your own 2 clauses one more time. Back to back. No commentary from me. He read the first one without looking down at it. Cannot operate as a veto on this committee's need for a complete factual record. He let a beat go by. An intimate portrait of a private life. A search of the household without ever entering it. He put a finger on the log. 72,100 pages that this committee itself marked non-responsive are still in a room on New Jersey Avenue. Which sentence is the rule? Nadler opened his mouth. That is the part Hattie Kwan describes when people ask her, and she has been asked more than she likes. He opened his mouth. There was an answer coming. She could see the shape of it arriving, the way a person sees a sentence start in somebody's face a half second before it gets to the teeth. And then it did not arrive. Hattie counted. She did not decide to count. Counting is what her hands do when the room stops moving. It has been that way since before she had this job. She counted the way she counts a cash drawer, in silent groups, without lips. She got to 41. 41 seconds is not a pause. A pause is 3 seconds. A long pause, the kind a good witness uses to make a chairman wait, is 8. 41 seconds is longer than the network breaks that pay for the room. Somewhere around 20, a photographer stopped shooting because the shutter had started to sound rude. Somewhere around 30, a staffer at the far end of the dais put down a phone. The camera timestamps confirmed it afterward to the second. That is how the number got into 3 newspapers and into one wire story that ran without a verb in the headline. For most of it, Nadler did not look down. That is worth saying. He did not hide in the binder, and he did not send the young man for a tab. He looked at the 2 sheets of paper in front of him, and he read them again. Both of them. And the room watched a man who has spent his entire adult life inside the record read his own record and find that it did not reconcile. At the end of the 41 seconds, he did not answer the question. He closed the binder. Not hard. He squared it with 2 fingers, the way a man squares a thing he does not intend to open again this morning. Then he folded his hands on top of it. I would like to review the log before I say anything further about it. That's a fair request. Staff will get you the file today. And Jim Jordan did not ask another question. He had 4 minutes left on the clock, and he gave them back. He put the 9 pages into the folder, closed it, and yielded. The next member began talking about something else. The cameras stayed on the witness table for a while, and then, one by one, they gave up. Nothing happened after that, in the sense that people usually mean when they ask what happened. No gavel came down on anybody. Nobody was referred anywhere. The hearing ran another hour and 40 minutes. It covered storage costs and a contract with a scanning vendor. It covered a question about humidity in the basement of the building on New Jersey Avenue. That turned out to be the most consequential thing anybody discussed all week, and it got no coverage at all. 2 weeks later, the committee published a 2-page notice. It was not a report. It amended the committee's own records rule. The disposition column must be filled in within 180 days of a production closing. Any account holder swept in by a transaction clause must be notified in writing by the committee itself, not by the institution, within 60 days. It passed on a voice vote. Both sides voted for it, which is why you did not hear about it. Jerry Nadler voted for it too. That is not a small thing, and it should not be reported as one. A man sat in a chair for 41 seconds with his own 2 sentences in front of him. Then he went back to his office. Some weeks later, he voted for the rule that would have stopped him. He did not give a speech about it. He did not go on television and explain the journey. He voted. Then he went to a markup about something else. The vote is in the record. It will be in the record in 50 years when everyone in that room is a name and a footnote. The 72,100 pages are still there. The rule is not retroactive. Rules almost never are, because the people who write them are always standing in the middle of something. Numbers are patient that way. They sit in a box in a basement. They do not get tired. They do not get bored. They do not care at all which party is holding the gavel this decade. They just wait for somebody to walk the list. Hattie Kwan flew back to Reno on a Friday with the notebook in her carry-on. She did not tell anybody at the hall about it for a while. It is not the kind of thing that comes up. The second Tuesday came around the way the second Tuesday does. She turned on the light in the back office, the one with the window facing the parking lot. She pulled the dues ledger and the bank statement. She sat down. It was the 312th time. She started at the bottom, the way she has started for 26 years, with the monthly analysis charge that nobody else reads. $11 and change. It matched. She moved up a line. It matched. She moved up again. Somewhere around the middle of the page, she stopped. She looked at the statement for a while. She thought about the redacted page that Jim Jordan had held up at chest height for about 2 seconds so the cameras could get it. Somebody's fund. Somebody's second Tuesday. Somebody who had done exactly what she does, in a hall like hers, in a state she has never been to. Somebody who had gone on doing it for 7 years? Nobody ever told her that 39 months of it sat in a box in Washington, under a heading that said non-responsive. That word bothered her more than any of it. Non-responsive. It means the material did not answer this question. It means somebody looked at a union hall's electric bill, and a caterer's payroll run, and a small fund's $11 in monthly charges, and concluded correctly that none of it had anything to do with anything, and then kept it. Hattie is not a political person, and she is not going to become one at 58. She did not write a letter to anybody. She did not join a thing. What she did was smaller than that, and she did it the following month, and it is the reason this story is worth telling at all. She added a line to the bottom of the local's reconciliation sheet. One line, in her own hand, under the analysis charge where the smallest things go. It reads, records requested by outside parties this period, and then a blank, and then the word confirmed. Most months the blank stays empty. She fills in the zero anyway. She has explained to two trustees now why an empty box and a zero are not the same thing. Both of them thought she was being difficult. Both of them were wrong. She let them think it, because she does not need to win an argument to keep a book. That is the whole of it. That is what the morning in room 2141 actually produced. Not a resignation, not a scandal, not a moment anybody will put in a documentary. A blank column got a rule. A clerk in Nevada added a line to a form, and a congressman who has spent 40 years believing the record would save him sat in a room and found out what everybody finds out eventually. The record does not take sides. It does not forget. It does not care how good your reason was. Jim Jordan took off his jacket. He asked the same question 3 times. He read 2 sentences back to back and did not add a word to either one. The tally is on the page now. That is the work. That is what the morning was. That is enough.